يا زاير كربلاء
You should not have to compete against a foreigner for your job. American college graduates should come first. And that starts with President Donald Trump. And this will affect everybody in this room, regardless of age. It is time for the largest deportation effort this country has ever seen. If you are here illegally, you are deported from the United States of America. Period. No amnesty. Repeat after me. No amnesty. Period. End of story. We will not put up with any exceptions, any carve-outs, any loopholes, any exceptions, any asterisks, any iotas. I don't care if it's 10 years or 15 years. We voted for mass deportations. We did not vote for mass amnesty. And we expect our leaders to deliver it and bring back our country to a place of citizenship and Americans being put first. Number two, very important. It is more than past time for our elected leaders to understand that they're going to have to put the economics of the next generation into their calculus. This is something that Mom Donnie does, but he does it so sloppily. He says, if you're bitter and you don't like the country, vote for me and I'm going to give you a bunch of free stuff. Everybody, endless tax cuts just for the wealthy. That's fine. I like tax cuts. It's good. My radio show does really well. Podcast does well. But I'll tell you right now, you are going to see a massive breakdown of the political order. If people don't own stuff, our politics are about to get a lot more radical.
Jeffrey Epstein was working on behalf of Intel Services, probably not American. And we have every right to ask, on whose behalf was he working? How does a guy go from being a math teacher at the Dalton School in the late 70s with no college degree to having multiple airplanes, a private island, and the largest residential house in Manhattan? Where did all the money come from? And no one has ever gotten to the bottom of that because no one has ever tried. And moreover, it's extremely obvious to anyone who watches that this guy had direct connections to a foreign government. Now, no one's allowed to say that that foreign government is Israel because we have been somehow cowed into thinking that that's naughty. There is nothing wrong with saying that. There is nothing hateful about saying that. There's nothing anti-Semitic about saying that. There's nothing even anti-Israel about saying that. I've spent my entire life pretty much in Washington.
By the way, do you know why so many of these unaccompanied alien minors are being put to work in slave wages and slave conditions all across California to pay off their cartel debts? The Democrat Party is funneling these profits from rape, profits from exploitation, and yes, profits from murder, into the hands of the cartels that control the north of Mexico, that assassinate politicians, that assassinate judges, that assassinate women and children, and that smuggle fentanyl into our country. Cartels are waging war against America, and their allies are the Democrat Party. And their allies are the Democrat politicians that are incentivizing these migrant mobs to try to murder our ICE officers in cold blood. I never thought we would ever see the day when Democrat politicians would use language and use rhetoric that would encourage illegal aliens and radical left nonprofits to try to murder ICE officers. But that's where we are right now. And what we are seeing done to this country is the mass theft of wages from the middle class to the migrant mobs, and that has to stop.
Clearly has been bubbling up over the past few days, but now spilling out into the public between Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino. He took the day off today from work, we're told, because he's so upset about the rollout of the Epstein memo that DOJ released earlier this week. Two sources familiar with the meeting say both were at the White House on Wednesday to discuss a unity path forward with the Trump administration following criticism from the Trump base about a DOJ memo out earlier this week that insisted Jeffrey Epstein's client list never existed and he committed suicide. Now, this after Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel and Bongino for months said Epstein information would indeed be released in some form. Bongino apparently was so upset, again, he did not come to work. One source says They haven't seen him since Wednesday at work, and he may end up resigning. He was critical of the Bureau as a podcast host before being named Deputy FBI Director. As for Bondi, she's close with President Trump, has been for years. I asked the White House if the president is happy with the Attorney General. I'm told yes, he is. Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, says the president is proud of the Attorney General's efforts to execute his Make America Safe Again agenda, restore the integrity of the DOJ, and bring justice to the victims of crime. The continued fixation on sowing division in President Trump's cabinet is baseless and unfounded in reality. That's from Caroline Leavitt. Her deputy, Harrison Fields, says of Bongino and Mr. Patel, the FBI director, the president has assembled a highly qualified and experienced law and order team.
You didn't trust them?
Not as far as I could throw them. We don't allow the Israelis into CIA headquarters because they would always come with gifts, and the gifts had always listening devices packed inside them. And, you know, somebody brings you a gift, you x-ray it. It's the normal process. And we're like, you guys can't keep coming back here every single time trying to bug our conference rooms. So, no more.
What percentage of the time the gifts have bugs in them?
100%.
Be quiet.
No, seriously.
Are you kidding me?
Absolutely not. I wish I was.
100% of the time they brought gifts that had bugs in them.
Yeah. We had a safe house in Virginia, and we would meet with them there.
John, was that across the board with everybody that didn't trust them the most?
Oh, yeah.
What percentage of our guys you work with didn't trust Mossad?
100%. I'll give you another example.
Okay, give me one you trusted the most.
The Brits. I worked very, very closely with the Brits.
Why were they easier to work with?
Because our national interests are so closely aligned.
Welcome to Truth with J.J. Carrell. That's a big montage, a big beginning, a cold open. Why? Because I'm going to touch on all those subjects today with an incredible guest, Douglas Colonel Macgregor. I've had him on my show before. I consider this man to have wisdom. And that is a commodity that very, very few people in the world have, right? You look at the Bible, you read the Bible, what's the greatest treasure you can give me, God, is wisdom, because it's so rare. So we're going to talk to retired Colonel Douglas Macgregor about all these issues: the open borders, Epstein, the pact with Israel, the state of America. What is the state of America? I would have to say it's incredibly better than Biden. Biden was an absolute, we were sinking. Like the ship, the bottom of the ship was up, we were tilted and we were going down. Somehow Trump was able to get us afloat again. That's why I feel like we're afloat. Now we got to start moving. I think that we have a little movement. And this is not a knock on Donald Trump by any means. He was given a nation completely in ruins. And if you think that's hyperbole, you're insane. You're insane. Over 50 million illegal aliens are in our country. Our economy was tanked. Every nation on planet Earth had an upside down trade system with us, a trade partnership where we were paying tariffs. They were tariffing our goods, and we were not tariffing theirs. So we were upside down, trade imbalances like crazy. Law and order, it didn't exist under Biden. We were in wars. We're still in wars. The administrative deep state is destroying our country. Everyone knows it. We just went through the horrors, and I call it a horror, the horrors of the LGBTQ transgender insanity. Think about what we travel, the dimension of insanity, the dimension of horror. And why do I say horror? We were taking children and mutilating their bodies. We're still doing that. Taking children and mutilating their bodies. Can you believe I'm saying that out loud? Well, my God, JJ, who was mutilating their bodies? Or who are mutilating? Well, that would be their parents, their moms and dads. This isn't like some Twilight Zone horror film where aliens are taking children and dissecting their bodies. No, these are moms and dads offering up their children as sacrifice to the transgender ideology. We will see mass suicides across America, mass suicides in the coming years. Because all of these children, where they have had their bodies mutilated, will grow up to be adults. All the adults that I'm talking to now, if I told you when you became an adult, 18, 19, you got married, but you can never have sex, you're never going to enjoy sex. And you're going to have those sexual urges. They're going to be coursing through your body, and there's no release. None. And then you're going to look at your mother and father at Christmas, at Thanksgiving, and holidays, and you're going to think, you did this to me. You did this. I can't have children. You destroyed my life. I don't even know what I am. That's the world we're living in. That is the world that we have come to. America is, it feels as if we're on the brink. It feels like we're teetering on everything. Like if Donald Trump was assassinated, Donald Trump was removed from office, Donald Trump died, do you think that we're going to continue down this road? Or do you think we're going to get more rhinos? Because they're just waiting him out. That's my belief. Before I bring in the next guest, because I want to just give him all the time that we have, because I want to hear what he has to say, because I find him ahead of the curve. Before I do, I want to talk about two sponsors that we have that are sponsoring this show, and that is sat123.com, sat123.com. Go to sat123.com/JJ. I love this organization, this company. America run, America built for Americans. You call that number on the screen and you'll be shocked to hear English. Yep. Not English from Bangladesh or India, English from a American citizen. You don't have to punch 17 different numbers to get to what you want. It's just, hello, may I help you? Absolutely incredible. And they have incredible products. Be prepared. That's the mantra of this show. Be prepared. You don't think you need a sat phone? Go ask the people from Carrell, Texas, New Jersey, New York right now, as the subways are flooding. You don't need connectability? Yes, you do. You always do. Or just take it from this. Not a natural disaster. I have a young son that will be learning how to drive very shortly, which frightens me. He's going to have a sat phone in his glove box at all times. Just going to use it. It's charged. Going to use it when he can't get cell coverage, when he needs to speak to me, or I need to speak to him. Period. I'm going to be prepared. My son's going to be prepared. Go to sat123.com/JJ, and he's going to go to school next year at 8th grade, and he's going to have a ballistic backpack. A ballistic backpack. I can't believe I'm saying that out loud, but that's what he's going to have. And the second sponsor I would like to touch on, and I would like you to support, and that is bellagrace.com. I take their elixir, 30-day challenge. I took it. It changed my immune system. It changed, as collagen in it, so it changed the strength of my hair and my skin. But I used it for my gut, for my immune system that has been ravaged from COVID and remdesivir, et cetera, et cetera. Go to shopbellagrace.com/truth, shopbellagrace.com/truth. I use two of their products. I use the sleep restorative gummy I took last night. It's non-toxin. It's non-addictive. It just calms me down, because after I'm looking at some of this stuff that me and Colonel Macgregor are going to talk about, it makes me not anxious, just makes me my mind can't slow down. So I take the restorative sleep gummies, and I take every single day the elixir. shopbellagrace.com/truth. All right. If Colonel Macgregor is ready, Thomas, let's go ahead and bring him in. Mr. Macgregor, how are you doing, sir?
Good, JJ. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you too. It's only been maybe a couple, maybe 1 or 2 months since I've last spoken to you, but dear Lord, sir, I can't even keep up. What is going on? And maybe the first question we can have starting out, can you give me your state of the union? What do you think is America right now? Where are we at? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think, frankly, that the current administration is turning out to be, for the most part, an extension of the last one. I would hope otherwise. And I do think that President Trump is sincere when he pronounces his views and things, but I don't think he's any more capable today of realizing his aims than he was 5 or 6 years ago when he was in office. He seems just as feckless, and so one has to question sometimes the sincerity of his claims. But I think the record at this point speaks for itself, and everything he's done beyond the borders of the United States has turned out to be disastrous. He hasn't achieved any of the aims that he said he wanted to. In fact, he's backtracked and done reversals. That's in the Middle East, that's in Asia, that's, in Eastern Europe. The trade war that we've unleashed, I don't know if I'd call it a trade war, let's just say tariff war, has been very destructive. And people normally think of it in terms of how much more we pay as a result of the tariffs that are imposed. But truthfully, it's worse than that. In places like Japan and the Republic of South Korea, these people have effectively concluded that we've lost our minds, that we are punishing them for reasons that make no sense. And the president is this dangerous rogue individual who could move at any time in any direction and bomb anybody he wants. I mean, that's not a good thing. And unfortunately, most everybody in Asia has concluded that, we're an unstable society at best. Then when you look at us internally, from the very beginning, as you and I talked some time ago, there was never a coherent strategy to deal with not just border security, but also the issue of illegal aliens inside the United States. We talked about, well, we're going to round these people up and send them home or send them wherever they belong. And the answer has been, no, we're not going to do anything. We're thinking about it, and we're going to henpeck here and there. But there is no coherent strategic plan. There is no coherent strategic leadership. As much as I personally like Tom Homan, I don't think he really understands how to handle this on a national level. And I don't blame him, because he has no experience with that. And I don't think anybody has bothered to go back and look at the previous mass deportations that we engaged in 1929, 1934, 36, again under Truman, 1945, 46, 47, and then ultimately under Eisenhower in the 1950s. That if you don't know what happened then and how things were done, why they were successful, then how can you possibly do anything now that will work? So the bottom line is, as much as I had hoped for good things from President Trump, frankly, I just don't see much coming our way these days.
Let's stay on the topic of immigration just for a second. You and I talked about this, no plan. I do agree with you on that. And numbers don't lie, and the reactions of the people in charge don't lie. So Donald Trump has removed, basically fired, they can call it reassigned, whatever they want. He's fired 2 ICE directors, and then Tom Homan has come on multiple times, absolutely just frustrated beyond belief. No money, no personnel, no real strategy. You have Stephen Miller going on and being reported that he's had massive upset discussions with DHS officials that the deportations are not enough. And then we look at last month, June, the ICE and Border Patrol touted 30,000 arrests and deportation. That's 1,000 a day, sir. That's not even a drop in the bucket. There's over 50 million illegal aliens in America, and now we're looking at 30,000 a month. What's your take on that?
Well, it's a gesture, nothing more. It's unserious. It's not going to make a dent. I think what we have to do at this point is stand back and look at what we've experienced thus far. And you and I talked previously about events in Los Angeles, but I think Los Angeles is a very important test case. We reckon that there are, 1.2 million illegal aliens living in Los Angeles. At least that's a number that's being floated to me by several different sources. We also know that ICE officials or officers that went in to enforce the law have been attacked by people on the grounds that They are not going to allow us to enforce the law. You have a governor and a mayor who are very blatant in their unwillingness to enforce federal law. The other thing that we've seen, too, is the use of foreign flags from Mexico, Nicaragua, El Salvador. And I remember watching as one man on the screen made it very clear, it had to be translated into English, obviously. And this man is reportedly or allegedly an American citizen, say that we're not leaving. We're not going, they're not going, we're all staying, this is ours. So I think what you have right now are vast numbers, millions of people potentially inside the United States that are rallying behind the cause of illegal immigration against the nation. In other words, these are not people rallying to the nation's interest. These people are not organizing to support the United States. They're not organizing to implement federal law. On the contrary, they want to obstruct it. So the real question is, what do we do about this? And thus far, I see a lot of evidence that nobody wants to even touch it. And frankly, if you don't address this, nothing is going to change inside the United States. In other words, laws don't enforce themselves. They have to be enforced. And if you're dealing with large numbers of people like that in California, then you're going to have to treat California and a place like Los Angeles as essentially a secessionist zone. And you need, once again, to have military power on hand to enforce the law. Now, we've done this before. We talked about it, that the military was involved in all these mass deportations, primarily the U.S. Army. But again, I think President Trump has been afraid to do anything along those lines. And I mean afraid. I think he's fearful. I think he's fearful of the reaction in the Senate and the House. I think he's also, being advised by the various influencers around him. He has on hand large numbers of so-called Israeli influencers. And let's be frank, none of them give a damn what happens to the United States. They are preeminently focused on keeping us focused on the Middle East and supporting the Greater Israel Project. Well, we need to be focused on the Greater America Project, which is right here in the continental United States. And if we're not going to do that, I don't think we're going to last too much longer. The country could conceivably fall into chaos, especially if we go into financial crisis. I think we're already in one, but I'm talking about something much more serious. So all of those things have to be taken into account. And right now, nobody seems to want to do it. It's not politically popular to stand up and say, listen, we've got to determine something. You are either an American or you are not. If you're not an American, what are you doing here? Are you here legally or not? If you're not here legally for some reason, you've got to go. End of discussion. And you've got to have federal judges appointed by the president. You could appoint them in panels if necessary to accelerate the process, to hold these hearings and make the decision on who goes and who stays. But I've seen no effort to do that. And that's something the president has the power to do. He can appoint federal judges to sit on panels in an emergency setting as these people are rounded up, have the hearing, make the decision, and move. We don't have to wait for something to reach the Supreme Court. And we don't have to fight our way through various phalanxes of judges who've been appointed by previous presidents who are unalterably opposed to doing anything that saves the United States of America.
I agree with that completely. Let's go down the list real quick of what I believe that needs to happen, and then I would like you to fill in using your military background, because I believe that military piece is the biggest piece of the puzzle that's missing. Meaning, if I was Tom Homan, or if I was advising Tom Homan from the very beginning, my first pitch would be, listen, you, me, guys like us, we are experts at knowing where the illegals are, how to get them, where to arrest them. But you and I are not specialists in movement of large amounts of people, meaning the actual funnel into court hearings and out into airplanes and flying airplanes out. We don't have that skill set. Why don't we bring in a military expert that's been in battle, that's been in war, moving supply lines? It's the same premise, and please correct me if you think that I'm off base there. But one thing, these are the things that have to happen now. Massive deportation facilities like Alligator Alcatraz needs to be built across the southwest border. At the same time, makeshift courthouses need to be erected literally side by side, and then military as well as law enforcement officers need to be deputized as judges, immigration judges, and then we're working 24 hours a day, churning them out as fast as we're arresting. That's how fast they get adjudicated through due process, which is an absolute boondoggle to even think about due process. It's such a lie. It's such a misnomer of words. Sir, outside of building detention centers and having judges on call 24 hours a day, where or what do you see the military playing the role in logistics? Am I wrong in thinking that, because you mentioned 29, 39, 45 Eisenhower, the military did play a role. Why are we not using the military in that same role now?
Well, it's a good question. I think that there are people on the Hill that have demonized the use of the military on the grounds that it's somehow or another offensive or fascist or something else. Mm-hmm. In which case, then I suppose Woodrow Wilson, FDR, Harry Truman, along with Eisenhower, are all horrible fascists because they all employed the military to achieve similar outcomes. First and foremost, had I been advising the president, I would say, Mr. President, get rid of DHS. I haven't figured out what the hell we need DHS for. I think it's a carbuncle on the rear end of Washington, D.C. And I don't think that appointing Kristi Noem necessarily was a good idea. I mean, I'm sure she was fine as governor. She's a very nice person, very attractive. That's great. But that's not what we're looking for right now. So I would be inclined to save a lot of money right up front, dispose of DHS, get rid of it. The next thing I would do is that I would bring in the Secretary of the Army, and I would bring in federal law enforcement from the Justice Department. And I would say, Mr. Secretary, you are now responsible to organize, mobilize assets, provide forces, whatever is required in support of deportation. And you are going to sit down with the Justice Department and you are going to plan out the deportation system. Now, how does that work? Well, you don't necessarily go nationwide overnight. You pick areas and then you focus your attention on the area. In other words, you round up people and you prepare to deport them. You do it in pieces over time across the country. But first and foremost, and this is something else I would tell the Secretary of the Army to do, is that you must secure our land borders. Now, you and I know that the picture has improved dramatically between the legal ports of entry, but the ports of entry are still fraught with problems. We still have lots of people who have been compromised by the drug cartels. We've got to get control of that, even if that means that you begin rotating military police formations, expert soldiers, whatever it is, often in and out of these legal ports of entry. You know, we've got to get the Marine Corps involved in the harbors. You know, we have this thing called the Coast Guard, but part of the Coast Guard is running around in the South China Sea, the Persian Gulf. That needs to stop. They need to come home. But the Marines need to help us clean up the ports because the harbors themselves are places where tens of thousands of illegals are deposited from Asia and from Latin America and other countries on a routine basis. In other words, you've got to pin the rose on people, and you've got to tell the Secretary of the Army, you will appoint a general officer. I don't care if he's a 2-star or 3-star. We don't need another 4-star, for God's sakes. In the past, it was usually a 2-star. But you will appoint this man, and it is his job to put together the plan that's going to attack deportation requirements across the country. That man has to coordinate with and support whomever it is in the Justice Department that we're going to identify as responsible for running this. Now, the problem, you know this as well as I do, for Tom Homan is it's a non-job. What is a border czar? A border czar is nothing. He's right. He says, I don't have personnel, I don't have money. You have to appoint someone who has the legal authority to execute the mission. That general officer alone can't do it. He can support it, he can facilitate it, and he'll have orders to do that. But ultimately, you have to have one person in charge of the whole process. Preferably, I think that would be someone who is a civilian official from the Justice Department. But that man, with the lieutenant general at his side, puts together the plan, and we begin operating day by day, week by week, month by month to round people up. But before we do that, we have got to really secure the borders and the harbors. We've got to get control of the airports. Now, if some of that requires federalization of local guard forces, that's fine. We've done that before. But the regular Army has the assets, and if we need to federalize some of the guard in order to utilize trucks, utilize barbed wire, utilize whatever is required to set this up, we should certainly look into that. Now, we're probably going to run into trouble in California, so we might as well start there. That's where you have the highest concentration, and deal in a forthright, direct manner with the governor and the mayor, both of whom are ostensibly hostile to the United States and its interests. This is not going to change. So if you're going to break the back of this resistance in order to enforce federal law, you better start there and focus everything that you have on Los Angeles and on Southern California. That's where I would begin. Then you can go elsewhere. And you're going to learn as you go. You'll get better and better over time because you'll work with local police and you'll find out how they do business. Now, there's plenty of instruction out there from previous experience of how to integrate the National Guard, the regular Army, or Marines, and local law enforcement. It can be done. There's no question about it. All the information is there. We know how to do this. But you've got to make a decision right at the top. Number one, who's going to be in charge? Number two, Mr. Secretary of the Army, you are going to support this and ensure that this is successful. You're going to appoint a general officer who will have authority to commandeer, employ whatever assets logistically or militarily or troop-wise that he needs to be successful. And then finally, here's the strategy. Where do we start? How do we get this done? And all of this has to be coordinated, as you know, with the Border Patrol, as well as with the customs officials. It's critical. You can't do this independently.
Everything that you said, I agree 100%. And I've been watching for years, waiting for Donald Trump to come back into office and listen to Tom Homan, who I'm a big fan of, talk about the deportations, talk about the arrest. And the whole time, sir, I'm thinking, where's the plan? This is a monster that we're trying to tackle. Where is the plan? And I think they just didn't have a plan. They thought they were just going to systematically go and arrest people. But sir, the problem that I have, the bigger question I have is, how did they think that was how it should be done? That was their quote plan. There's 50 million illegal aliens in America. There's less than 6,000 ICE officers. Less than 6,000 to arrest 50 million. Look, I know my number, and I've written in my books and my documentary, it's 50 million. 50 million-ish. I could go up to about 55 million. Here's what's crazy, sir, and I don't know if you've heard this. From reputable sources, they are now floating the number 60 million. So they do this, they float the number out there and they see what the reaction is and they pull it back and they float it out again. I can honestly say that our trajectory is to probably 60 million. This is insane.
Well, the first thing you do, I think, is that you make the determination, and this is something I've suggested. I understand that some form of it has happened, that you tell everybody that you have X number of days. I said this from the beginning. Everybody has 120 days to voluntarily remove themselves. If you voluntarily remove yourself, you can take your belongings with you. If you've made money here, you can have your money, and you can register on the way out. And when we think there is a stable society again inside the United States where the rule of law is truly enforced, we can invite you to come back if you want to be on that list. So the first thing we needed to do was that. Secondly, once we decide to deport, I think we have to start with the people that have come here within the last 5 years. If you came here within the last 5 years illegally, you're the first to go. You got to go immediately. That probably accounts for what, 15, 20 million, something in that neighborhood. So that's the first step. Now, why do I say that instead of trying to deport everybody who may not be here legally? Because in other cases, people that are not here legally may not be engaged in anything illegal. They may have settled into some sort of life. They may have tried in the past for whatever reason to get citizenship. We don't know. But we have to make a distinction between those that have been here for some time and those that are brand new. Now, once the brand new crowd is gone, then we can start making decisions about the rest of the people who are here. But the last thing we need is something that President Trump mentioned. He mentioned that there were discussions in the White House and on the Hill about granting amnesty. Now, what happened when we granted amnesty in the 1980s? All you have to do is look at the curve on a graph. When did illegal immigration really go rabid and take off? After Reagan's amnesty. Amnesty is not the answer. So we absolutely must oppose amnesty under any and all conditions. So that's off the table. Any attempt to do that is a betrayal of the United States and the American people. Of course, you and I both know that was treason under Biden, opening our borders to anyone who wanted to come in, regardless of who they were, without vetting anybody. I mean, even Bill Clinton, who is hardly the paragon of law and order, answered a reporter who asked about why are we having problems with these people and doing these various things that are illegal. He said, well, they weren't vetted. If you don't vet anybody, you're going to have problems. Well, of course, that's something we know. And the reason I say the last 5 years is also something else. We are going to encounter along the way opposition from the drug cartels. You can talk about that with greater authority than I can. But I've traveled around the country. It's pretty obvious to me that illegal human trafficking and the drug cartels are inextricably intertwined. And if you're really going to close the border, which we really haven't, as you and I both know, really shut it down to illegal human trafficking and drugs, and then you're going to have problems with the cartels in any case because you're depriving them of their living. How many billions of dollars in hard, cold cash do trucks carry south every day, every week, every month? I don't know, but it's huge, and they just drive through. No one stops them. No one confiscates any of it. No one asks them any hard questions. So all of this has to be taken on. Now, the point that I made when I was still in the administration is we've got to shed these overseas military commitments. We've got to bring all of the ground forces home. That's number one. Eventually, we should scale back our military commitments overseas everywhere. We have too many bases overseas. We're everybody's first responder, and we've got an intelligence community, the CIA, joined at the hip with Mossad and MI6, that's permanently in the business of subverting other people's governments. That needs to stop, and I think President Trump knows that, but it's unclear to me that he knows how to stop it. I don't think he does, and I think this goes back to when he was running and promises he made behind the scenes in order to have hundreds of millions of dollars work in his favor to get him into the White House. That's what's going on right now overseas in the Middle East. That's another reason why he seems incapable of ending any more support for this Ukrainian war. The $10 billion that he's allowing to go through isn't going to make any difference to the battlefield. But nevertheless, he seems incapable of doing the things that need to be done. And I blame that in part on the people that he's appointed, because the people he's appointed are, for the most part, not knowledgeable enough to do these jobs.
Well, I think this is a great segue into something I want. There's so much I want to talk to you about. I got 15 minutes, and I'm trying to blast it in. But you're bringing me into this next topic that is, and I believe, sir, that everything you and I are talking about is connected. The wars overseas, the connection to Israel, the Ukrainian war, the open borders, and all of our military commitments, as you say, overseas. The enemy is inside of our country now. And what is that enemy? It's Islam. And the Islamization of America, because of our open borders, because of the debacle in Afghanistan, bringing 86,000 people over within days, unvetted. But we're looking at towns, cities, states now, they're being consumed by Islam. I want to show you one video because I think it's powerful. And I want to share, it's about 50 seconds long. Hey, Thomas, can you play number 8 on my clip? Because this is Dearborn, I believe it's Dearborn, Michigan. My God. Yeah, go ahead and play
this. چشمات از عشقت شده دریا بابا میبینم که بغضی توی صداته یا زهرا داری روی لبها بابا قربون دستای لرزونت بابا پرخون زلف پریشونت بابا اشکاتو پاک کن مگه زینب مرده.
Can you tell? I could see some of it. It wasn't the best picture in the world, and of course, I heard the Arabic in the background. But can you tell us what we're seeing?
Yeah. So that's Dearborn, Michigan. That is, and I played another video, sir, before you came on of Dearborn, Michigan. Just the neighborhoods, just a neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood with Palestinian flags, with Islamic flags waving. That was like a protest in Dearborn, Michigan. And it just goes on and it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. How does that not frighten America? And I could show you videos from across America, which I know you're aware of. What is your response? Do you think that this is hyperbole, I'm overreacting, but my data says not? What do you say, sir?
I think we've got a serious problem because at the Republican National Convention back in, I guess it was early August, before the election, there was a giant Israeli flag on the wall and a big sign over it that said Israel first. And then a man who was ostensibly speaking on behalf of the Israel lobby, I guess, came out and tried to lead cheers for Israel first. It was the first time in my lifetime that I've ever seen a foreign flag at a national political convention. Now, maybe others have seen it. I never have. Whether it was Democrat or Republican didn't make any difference. The only flags that I saw anywhere were American flags. You might see a state flag, somebody waving that, but there was no question that the American flag and the American citizenship and national identity were at the center of the political discussion. So now let us move on to what you were showing. If we are going to tolerate the Israeli flag at a national political convention, you're going to have a great deal of difficulty removing Palestinian flags that are on display in a place like Dearborn, Michigan. Now, personally, I don't like it. I never have. I'm not a hybrid American. I don't believe in hyphenated identities. Either you are an American or you are not, all right? And I think that's where we are today. It's unfortunate that it has reached this point, but every time someone raised objections to admitting large numbers of people who were not Europeans, who were not Christians, was immediately castigated as an evil racist, an advocate for apartheid, or God knows what else. And we were shouted as Americans collectively into silence. And so we sat obediently while the floodgates were open. By the way, this all starts with Senator Jacob Javits in 1965, who was supported by Senator Ted Kennedy in changing laws regarding immigration. Then there was also a court case the same year involving a Jewish citizen in the United States who had come to the United States from Poland. And then he'd made his fortune and decided he wanted to live out the rest of his life in Israel. So he went to Israel and ultimately voted in an Israeli election while still being an American citizen. Well, the laws at that time were very straightforward. If you serve in the armed forces of a foreign country, if you vote in the election on foreign soil of a foreign government, you automatically forfeit your citizenship. So he was stripped of American citizenship by the Secretary of State. Well, this came up before the Supreme Court. And ultimately, the Supreme Court overturned that law. Well, here we are. In other words, there is no requirement to be exclusively an American. You can come here, you can get American citizenship, you can pledge allegiance to it, and retain citizenship in other countries. And you can also fly other flags and behave in the way that you are seeing. Now, personally, I'm very supportive of ending this policy of killing or expelling people from Gaza. I think it's horrific. It's an atrocity. It ought to stop. I'm not anti-Israeli, and I'm not saying that I support the Palestinian cause, however they define that. But I do oppose atrocities that kill people, regardless of what their race, religion, creed, color, or anything else may be. But you can't stop one thing and tolerate the other. And I think that's what people in New York City are now finding out. And let's be perfectly frank, that the Jewish community in the United States has always been in the forefront of overturning the laws that excluded anyone from coming to this country who was not a European and not Christian. They were always very much in the forefront of what they billed as civil rights. Well, this advocacy that they have pursued for decades has now come home to New York City. And they are finding that they are being overwhelmed by people in New York City who have determined that they want to run that city. And let's be frank, once again, the Jewish community in New York City has been the dominant force in that city for many, many years, many decades. I guess what I'm trying to say is that you can't say one thing and do another. You cannot condemn one thing and then not condemn the other. But how do we get back, if we can get back at all, to the notion that you are either an American or you are not? That's important. I would get rid of all of this stuff, but I don't have the authority. Certainly, I would not allow anyone who is not exclusively an American citizen. In other words, I would not allow anyone who is a dual citizen to hold federal office and authority in the United States, ever. I would not.
Well, that's prevalent throughout our Congress right now, sir.
I know. And what I'm trying to tell you is that this began in 1965. You're familiar with the boiling frog. Well, the notion that, the frog, you put him in lukewarm water and the frog swims around, you gradually turn up the heat, and eventually the frog dies because he doesn't hop out. Well, that's us. We're the boiling frog. And the people in New York City that don't like this new man that has been designated candidate for the Democrats, they don't like him. They're boiling. It's too late. In fact, I would argue they're boiled. So the question is, what do we do now? We can't seem to even demand that people in this country obey the law. I mean, literally, that's what it comes down to. We have trouble enforcing the rule of law. So I don't have an easy answer. But I think today, how many Muslims do we have inside the United States?
Millions.
No, it's 7 or 8 million, something like that. And the last time I looked, there are more Muslims than there are Jews inside the United States, which is kind of a shocking statistic, if you will. So it's a fact of life. What are we going to do about it? Are you going to overturn the existing body of laws and say, we were wrong, that's a mistake, we're now going to do things differently? I mean, we also have laws in the books about polygamy. That's against the law. Are we going to enforce those? We've tried to enforce those against the Mormons. We've had some general success, but what else are we going to enforce? What else are we going to stop? Do we pass laws that say the only flag that may be displayed publicly at any official function is the American flag or the local state flag? I mean, what are we going to do? I'm not disagreeing with your intention to ring the alarm bell. My point is, we're the boiled frog. How do we unboil the frog?
No, I think that's a great point, and it's one that I share too. Like, I like to point out the problem, but I'm a solution guy. And the same, I'm sure you were when you were in your position of authority. I don't want just problems. I want the problem, yes, but I want a solution. And the issue right here, though, sir, is here's the problem. I don't really have a solution except to follow the law and do what's right. And I don't believe we have the wherewithal to do that. We just don't. That's a fact. You have foreign flags waving in our houses of Congress, literally on their doors, going into the congressman, on the floor of the House, waving the Ukrainian flag, the Israeli flag, the Guatemalan flag. We have illegal aliens that are in Congress right now. This is absurd. And you talked about something that's very powerful, the rule of law. But prior to the rule, before I go into segue into the rule of law, because I think that is the linchpin to everything, I just want our audience to understand what you're talking about, the dual allegiance, the Israel first, foreign national allegiance. That's not hyperbole. If anything, because of time constraints, it's understated. And I'm going to show you one small clip, short clip, about maybe 25 seconds. This is the State Department spokeswoman, Tammy Bruce. And I want you to listen to what she said. And it was so quick and so short that no one really caught on to it. But I want just your reaction. It's number 10, Thomas. Can you play that for me, please?
That 10. Facilitates making things better for people. And in the greatest country on earth, next to Israel. It's an honor to be able to make a difference and to be able to speak in this regard with an administration that I love so much and that I feel genuinely represented by. It's a real honor.
I can't believe she said it when I heard it, and I thought, why is no one talking about this? The greatest country next to Israel.
Well, we have
what
to go
in God's name?
Well, we have to go back to the Republican National Convention and the Israeli flag and Israel first. I mean, most people looked at that and thought, well, that's strange. Never seen that before. And they went on about their business because President Trump talked in terms that were very attractive. You know, people aren't interested in wars overseas. They would like us to disengage as much as possible. President Trump seemed to support that. And so President Trump got a lot of support from a lot of people on that basis. President Trump has always waved the American flag and identified himself with American nationalism. And so I think people stood back and said, well, you know, we're not going to get too excited over that. You know, that's fine. We now know different. We now know that if you go back and look at interviews with Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, for instance, as well as Bondi and others, the first thing they say, well, what's your first priority? Israel, the defense of Israel. Well, you're going to be head of the FBI. You're going to lead the Justice Department. And your number one priority is the defense of Israel. Is that not a little strange? Does that not cause some degree of cognitive dissonance? And apparently not. And then you have Hegseth, Secretary of Defense. His deputy is a billionaire named Feinberg from New York City with no military background or experience in the defense industries. And why he's there is anybody's guess. I leave it to you and your audience to figure that one out. But Hegseth has made it abundantly clear that he's an Israel first guy. And he's there to do whatever Israel needs and Israel wants. So I think what you got is not an American first administration. You have an Israel first administration. And that's going to inflame the passions across the country. Because if you can have an Israel first administration, you have millions of Latinos from various places in Latin America, many of whom are here illegally. And their view is, well, then why can't this be part of Latin America? You're going to find all sorts of people in the United States are going to take the similar position. Well, if that's good for them, and I live in Dearborn, Michigan, and I'm a Muslim Arab, then damn it, I can do whatever the hell I want. In other words, President Trump has not only told the truth, has not only not told the truth and has misled people, he's raised a false flag. And everyone followed the false flag into the voting booth. Well, now we know that wasn't true. When you look at the other side, whether it's Ocasio-Cortez or others, frankly, they're a little bit more straightforward and honest about their hostility to the United States government and the American people, and they say so. Might as well say the same thing now inside the Trump administration. And I think effectively that's what Tammy Bruce did. She was being honest. That's her mandate. That's part of her list of qualifications. She's Israel first.
I have 2 minutes left with you, sir. Could you give me, and I know it's not enough time, what is the recourse? If you were in charge or you were a senior advisor to Trump, Give me the first three things that you would advise him to do. Like, sir, this is paramount. National security. We've got to get these three things under control. Or maybe it's two things, or maybe it's just one. What is your 1 minute, 2 minute elevator speech to Donald Trump, if that's all the time you had for him?
Number one, suspend legal immigration immediately. No more immigration into the United States, because we have tens of millions of people inside the United States that are not only not citizens, they're not even slightly interested in being Americans. So we have a problem with an American population that is not truly American anymore. So we can't take any more immigration for the time being. We can go back to the Exceptional Skills Act that was passed in the 1920s that allowed people like Einstein to come into the country. In other words, if you had exceptional skills and talents that could contribute to the United States, we let you in, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
We go back to that. But otherwise, suspend all legal immigration. Secondly, go back to what we discussed before. Absolutely, positively, truly shut down the borders. In other words, enforce the law at all the legal crossing points, even if you have to replace all the customs and police officials there with military men, and then rotate them in and out of those jobs. Then you've got to get the United States Army in charge of the border. The Secretary of the Army needs to take that on. By the way, that's a mission for the United States Army, continental defense. They need to get it back into that mission. Then you need to do what we discussed earlier. You need to make the deportation of people inside the United States who are not here legally the top priority. You need to designate a chain of command. You need to outline what the laws of or what the rules of engagement are, and then you need to get to work. And you need to get to work systematically and start, as I suggested, might as well start with Los Angeles and Southern California, and then move on to the rest of the country over time, understanding that this is going to take the next 2 or 3 years, if you do this properly, all of your time and focus. That means that we have to go to a different national strategy for the United States. That strategy really needs to be America first. That means that we disengage from these potential hotspots, conflicts, and wars overseas. We make it clear that the Europeans are going to have to be their own first responders. And for that matter, that's true of everybody. We demilitarize our relations with Asia as much as we can. In other words, get out of the business of trying to bully people into doing things that they don't want to do. We've done this with our financial system. We also do it with military power. In other words, that's a complete makeover in Washington. And that's what he was elected to do, JJ. That's what we voted for. We didn't vote for wider war in the Middle East. We didn't vote for wider war in Eastern Europe. We didn't vote for defend Taiwan in the event that the Chinese feel compelled to invade it. That's like the Chinese coming over and defending Cuba against an alleged American attempt to invade Cuba. Forget it. It makes no sense. We also can't win it. We've got to get out of the war business. And that's not popular. People love spending money on military power. It creates wealth. And all you have to do is drive around Washington, D.C. Look at the 7 counties. That's where all the money is.
Yep.
So that's what we elected Trump to do. He hasn't done any of it. I see no evidence that he will do any of it. So what I think is going to happen, we are going to have a massive financial crisis. You know, you can talk to Peter Schiff or Alistair McLeod or any number of people that are pointing to it. It's coming. And everybody says, well, is it going to happen tomorrow? Or is it going to happen next week? And nobody can tell you exactly when. As Nassim Taleb has said publicly, the dollar is not the reserve currency. Gold is the reserve currency now, because the dollar is no longer a store of value. So we're headed into really tough waters, and Nassim Taleb has said it could happen any day. He's been predicting Armageddon for at least a couple of years now. So that's coming. When that happens, we move from abundance to scarcity. When you go from abundance, where there's plenty of everything, food and gas and jobs, to scarcity, then it gets very ugly. And that's why Hoover made the decision to deport 9 million Mexicans in 1929. It wasn't because he didn't like Mexicans. That's nonsense. He wanted to open the jobs they were holding for American citizens, because he said, the way things are going with this depression, if I don't get these people who are foreigners out of here, they'll become targets of abuse and anger by American citizens. I don't want that. So I want to get them out of here for their safety, as well as for the American citizens who need jobs. we need to start thinking in those terms, because when you go from abundance to scarcity, eventually somebody says, wait a minute, who are you? Where are you from? Why are you getting this subsidy? Why are you in this line? Hell, you're not even from this country. That's where we're headed, I am afraid.
I'm afraid too, sir, that we are headed to a bottleneck of anger and frustration and resentment, and what that's going to manifest, I don't know. But sir, thank you so much for your time. I always enjoy talking to you. You are a fountain of information, of wisdom. I know you hate when I say that about you, but you are a very wise man, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, JJ. Talk to you soon.
I'll talk to you soon. Retired Colonel Douglas Macgregor. You want to know the truth? You want to know the backstory? You want to know just bold speak? That's the man you listen to. All right. Can Thomas just...
Welcome to Technocracy News with your host, Patrick Wood. I'm your co-host, Logan House. Today, we're going to start with, let me pull up my screen here. 1 second.